Welcome to Conversations for Peace with me, Pastor Jule, and today I am here with the Reverend Stacy Rector. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good. Yeah, it's good to get this recording.
Yes.
And just a few words about Stacy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I could probably talk about Stacy for quite a while.
More than a few words.
We are on camera, so I will behave. So we came to the Presbytery at almost the same time, back in the 90s.
In the 90s.
Which is dating us a little bit.
Yes,
but
it is.
Was it July 97?
I was October 97.
You were October.
Mm-hmm.
I was May.
Okay.
Our friend Rick Rocky, who has pastored here before, was July.
Okay. So
we both had a chance to vote on you.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for
we voted
accepting
yes.
me.
Yes. Bring her in.
Yeah.
So we have known each other for quite a while.
We have.
And have had different configurations of being together,
That's
different
right.
ways that in our personal life. We're both Presbyterian pastors.
Yes.
And so, there have been groups that we have been a part of.
Yes.
We've served on committees together.
We have.
The Outreach Mission Unit at one point.
That's right. That's right.
Giggled at a few Presbyterian meetings.
We have.
And a few other places
Yeah.
as well. And as I think about Stacy, laughter always comes to mind. You're one of the best.
And I love that. I hope, when I'm gone,
No.
that's what happens. That
She's
people
all
laugh.
about laughter, yes. And one of the best storytellers. She's got some fun stories from West Tennessee.
I do.
May or may not get into any of that today.
Probably not, but
Probably not.
someday.
A deep passion. And Stacy once worked down the road from me when I was working for a little bit with Methodists in the Green Hills area. Stacy was at Second.
Mm-hmm.
Here, Stacy also is our first person here in our new podcast. Digital
Very
room.
beautiful in here, folks.
We're working on it.
It's
We're working
lovely.
on it.
Mm-hmm.
And Stacy knows a thing or two about building renovation, actually building renewal.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us any more about yourself? There's a lot more I could tell. She's a cat lover. I know she is at it, big time advocacy. And I remember when you switched from working in the church to this new thing you're going to talk about a little bit. And I was like, wait, what? And it was a natural progression because you had been on the board and then moved into an executive director role.
Right.
And Stacy is awesome to always come and preach. You've been here to fill in when I have needed a guest, so we appreciate that. Folks love to hear from you. So it's fun to have this way to be able to talk to you and not just hear you preaching up in there. So tell us about you. What do you want our listeners to know about you as you introduce yourself?
Well, that was a great introduction. There's not much left to say.
I could tell
not much
more.
left to say. I'm a native Tennessean and born and raised, and have been in Nashville, like you said, for a good long time.
A good long time.
That's right, yeah. But I love it here, and it's home. The trajectory of my work, it's sometimes folks, and like Jule said, we're sort of burying the lead maybe a little bit here, but folks sometimes wonder how is it that I moved that direction, and I very much feel like it's a calling. God has really been at work calling me to this particular ministry that I'm involved with, and so it is very much a part of my identity, but not my whole identity. Obviously,
right.
It is my vocation. So I'd say I feel like I'm a child of God working in a very difficult world at times.
Right.
Trying to follow the way of Jesus. Not always very well, but
because
trying.
as you got asked on the floor of Presbytery, do you love Jesus?
And I said,
and you said yes.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And so anyway, it's there's a lot more to say, but it's this is who I am, and my ministry is a huge part of who I am.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's for so many of us, right, who are pastors.
Yeah.
And I think Stacy's a single woman. So that doesn't mean though that you don't have family and commitments of friends and family around you. That could be, we could go on forever about that.
Yeah.
Misperceptions.
Yeah.
But I know, like for me, my work is really important.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean I don't love my family and my friends.
Right.
And try to make time for them the best I can.
Yes.
But there's a way in which there's just like she works very hard and lots of hours and weird hours sometimes, right? Because you got to get called in sometimes. We're going to tell you in a little bit what she actually does, but let's hear more about like what do you love to do when you're not working? Like what really is your passion?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that about relationships. I'm in a moment, I think now. I sometimes feel like I've lived my life backwards a little bit, like in terms of but where I am pushing myself more outside of the vocation and building new relationships and trying to create more healthy boundaries. Right. I think I'm pretty healthy, but I could be better. Yeah, I could be healthier. Right. And so apart from the work, obviously, like you said, Jule, really, really blessed with so many wonderful human beings in my life, like amazing people like you, like so many who have nurtured me and held my hand and picked me up and along the way.
Walked with you. I remember your walking
and that's and I'm a huge walker.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of my life is making sure I'm walking in nature. I've also become very much disciplined in yoga.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm doing that every day to some degree, and I take a class once a week. Music is really important to me. Mm-hmm. Music, there's just something about it, that it speaks to you in a way that, for me, not a lot of other mediums do. Mm-hmm. And laughter, like you said. Right. I love to laugh. I love to tell funny stories. So yeah, I'm working on like not being so driven by the work and stepping back from it to the degree that I can,
right?
And continue to be impactful at what I do.
Right.
But I've also, what we're talking about today, like we have to take care of ourselves and our own souls, or we aren't going to be any good to anybody. Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. So I didn't know you were doing yoga. Yeah. I knew you were a walker, which is kind of funny. I have to tell you, I'm not going to tell you who, but I once was driving to work, here I am on my way, and I am on like West End, and I'm like, wait, that is so-and-so, one of our colleagues who had just retired, who's like walking her dog. So I'm like on my way to work. I called her and I was like, did I just see you? And she's like, oh yeah, like I walk my dog all the time, like getting out. And I'm like, okay, I'll wave at you next time.
Yeah, there you go.
She retired, and that was something restorative she was doing. Yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. So we have a yoga class here every Wednesday, 1:00.
Oh, do you?
You're definitely welcome.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you.
Love that about yoga. And your kitty cat. Do you have a kitty cat now?
I do. You
have a new one?
A new one.
Okay.
I wasn't really wanting to go down that road again, but this was a friend whose brother's a veterinarian. This was a cat whose human mom died. Oh. And was 12 at the time.
Oh, wow.
And beautiful boy, but he's older.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, old cat, okay. But I thought I can't handle kittens and the longevity that could follow, because my last cat lived to be 21 and a half years old.
Wow.
So I'm like, I don't think I can invest 21 and a half years, perhaps. Of course, I say that, and this cat will live to be 100. Yeah, but anyway, just to spite me.
Right, exactly.
But anyway, I've had him a year, and so we're doing okay.
Cool.
He's a great companion. He's just a creature in my home who I have to take care of. So.
Exactly. You have to go home at some point. You have to feed the cat.
I have to feed the cat. Yeah.
Unless you have one of those self-feeder type things. So.
I'm not that fancy.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us what it is you do. You're the executive director, and the name has changed over the years.
Yes,
so
and it may change again. Who knows?
For Tennesseans for alternatives to the death penalty.
That's it.
There's the work she does, which is pretty high pressured.
Yeah.
It's literally matters of life and death that you are dealing with every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us more about that work. I love to hear you speak about it.
It's something that I've always had I know this will be such a shock to you and those who know me who might watch this, that I've had a real passion for justice, things feeling like people are being treated right. It's just since I was little. And I was surrounded by people like that.
Right.
School teacher parents and grandparents who were all there, and they were all that way.
Right.
And so that's always been there. And when I was at Rhodes College, where I went to undergrad, I started getting involved with doing some work in the legal system with young people.
Okay.
And I was also doing some ministry, and just began to. I already knew it, but it was becoming more crystallized about the racial, the economics, all of the pieces that lend themselves to young Black kids going into the system in a way different rate and way than white kids. And I was at a college where a lot of young, privileged, mostly white kids were, who frankly also broke laws a lot. And there were not any kind of repercussions like you would see with these children living in public housing, where the police were constant, and on we can go. So I went to Columbia Seminary after college in Atlanta. And Atlanta, Tennessee had not been using the death penalty my entire life. Okay. We did not use it from 1960 to 2000.
Oh, wow. I did not. So she's going to educate about
so we had a death row, and people were being sentenced, but there was no political will to execute.
Okay.
And the people of Tennessee were not passionate about it either way. It was kind of an ambivalent, we call it an ambivalent state in terms of the death penalty. It just wasn't something that people thought that much about. And so everybody it was kind of status quo,
Yeah.
And when I got to Georgia, it was different. And I got to Georgia in 93.
Okay.
And you had a lot of the tough on crime rhetoric, and they were actively executing people in Georgia at that time. And so I began to sort of get tuned into that and got involved with a community called the Open Door Community, which is a group of, it was a couple of Presbyterians, ministers, and some other folks started it for people to live in Christian community coming off the street, as well as people coming out of prison.
Okay.
And Dead Man Walking, that movie came out in that period of time. And it was just a lot of things. And so when I still wasn't thinking, I'm going to go work on the death penalty. Like, I decided, I did a year of chaplaincy at Grady Hospital, and then came to Nashville to serve Second Church. And but right as I came to town, the governor here was, and I can't remember the exact sequence of events, but because it was the 90s and there was this tough on crime rhetoric, the governor had really taken that on and to sort of say, I'm going to resume executions in Tennessee.
Wow.
So I kind of came in as this young, very self-righteous,
that never happens.
Know-it-all.
Just coming out of seminary.
Coming out of everything about
we know all things.
We know all things, and we're right.
Exactly. We know what should happen in the church and how it should happen.
100%.
We're being sarcastic.
And I was very happy to tell everyone that too.
Yeah.
So, and frankly, all the other clergy were happy to have me step out there and do it.
Exactly. Everybody's like, you go do it.
You go, young pastor. You get out there. So I was like, there was already a clergy group sort of forming around stopping the executions, and so I kind of jumped into that, and long story short, it became very involved with the group. At the time had a different name, and I began visiting someone on death row as a part of a visitation program, and all of that just continued. I continued to learn about the system. Really my faith is what brought me, and I recognize Christians can have different opinions, but for me, following the way of Jesus one who was executed by the
Yeah,
state.
was executed by the state.
And who offers mercy without end, like it wasn't compatible for me. So that's what brought me to it. But then as I learned just how broken the system is and how not trustworthy it is, and how many innocent people get caught up in it, and what it does to victims' families, and the list goes on, the racial implications of it, you start going, why do we do this? Like, there's no benefit of having the death penalty system. In fact, it is doing damage and undermining actual healing and safety.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it goes even beyond, like, would you believe in it or not? To me, the question is, does it make us a safer, healthier society or less so?
Right.
And if it's less so, then that's a problem.
Right.
Right. So anyway, and so I just felt really strongly that if there was a way at some point, I'd been at Second for 9 years.
Yeah.
And I learned a whole lot, through a lot. The literal fire at Second. And so I just felt like if there's a way for me to do this work on the death penalty, God, you got to make it happen, because I don't know how to make it happen. I was like, I got to figure out something. I knew I needed to move on. Anyway, the position came open and I took it, and that was 18 years ago.
No, it's been forever.
It's been a long time. And we've really grown as an organization. I've grown a lot, learned a lot from a lot of people, and we've expanded our mission, which whether that will lead to a name change or not in the future, I don't know. But I say we've expanded, and my mentor in the work always says, you didn't expand, you enhanced, because you've already been doing this work. Like, you just are naming it in a different way. But our mission statement is now working to end the death penalty, prevent violence, and support those who experience harm.
Cool. Yeah,
so we're working now with a lot of different allies from the victims advocacy community, from violence prevention groups, because we really believe that investing in this overly punitive system that costs way more to taxpayers than alternatives would cost. Doing that and not attending in the way that I think we should to the needs of people who've experienced violence and trauma.
Right.
And not investing in communities, particularly disproportionately impacted, who are saying this is what we need to be safer here, and are being ignored.
Right.
And instead what we're being told is, no, we just need to lock people up for longer. No, we just need to execute people. Well, and I'm not talking about, of course there's accountability. Of course there has to be consequences for our actions. But there are ways to do that focus on healing harm and preventing future violence. And not just on punishment for punishment's sake.
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And in fact, Jule, this blew my mind. This new report just came out a few weeks ago from the Prison Policy Initiative, looking at incarceration rates. Tennessee is 9th in the world.
Oh, wow.
For incarceration per capita. Only country, so we're not, the states are ahead of us. So it's like, some states are ahead of us. The only country that's ahead of us is El Salvador.
Oh.
So this is just incarceration.
Right.
So when I hear the rhetoric out there from some of our state lawmakers, and of course on the national level, that we're just not being tough enough, we're just not locking up enough people, we're just not punishing people harsh, we did it more and more harshly. Right. This is what we've been doing for 40 years. Yeah. We are 9th in the world for incarceration.
Well, it's so nice to lead in something.
Well, and look how much, and look how safe we are.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying? So the whole thing is so disingenuous because it's not about actually addressing the problems. Right. Yeah. So I've sort of did a little segue there, but that's where the work is going there. And, we feel like with the death penalty is one of those things that as long as we are able to justify that as a society, a lot of these other problems are never going to get dealt with because it lets us justify a whole lot of stuff. Right. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And particularly, I would say, empty rhetoric and empty policies that aren't doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and except sadly can be fuel for politicians to scare people and make them, you know, afraid of each other.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and I'm not in any way trying to minimize the real fear people have and the real violence that's going on out there. It's all true.
Right.
Any violence is too much, but what are we actually doing to mitigate that? You know, so.
Yeah. So what are some examples of what could be done instead?
Well, I mean, that's a great question.
The alternatives.
Well, one of the, you know, there are restorative justice processes that are working. There's an amazing group here in Nashville called the Rafa Institute that are they're working with, they're moving into the adult space, but have mostly been in the juvenile justice space where they are intervening. Judge Calloway is getting cases to them. They are sitting down, I mean, serious cases, murder and other things, where they are sitting down with the person who committed the harm and the people who were harmed. So the state's not the mediator, it's the people directly impacted and figuring out what everybody needs.
Wow.
To the degree that it is possible, and this is restorative justice, right? To the degree that it is possible, what everybody needs to heal. And for this person who has done that harm, almost every time they are someone who has experienced harm, who has not ever dealt with it,
right,
and not been able to really understand what accountability looks like, right? And our system doesn't promote accountability.
Somebody who wasn't accountable for their
violence. And our system doesn't promote accountability, because it's an adversarial system where you're on this side, the state is coming after you, and your lawyers are telling you do not plead guilty, or they're telling you plead guilty to something maybe you didn't even do to get. You know, I mean, it's like there's no like I did this and here's why, because that doesn't work in your favor. Do you see what I mean? Like, so in a restorative justice space, you are safe to talk about those things. And again, I'm not saying that doesn't mean there's not incarceration as part of that too.
Right.
But it is such a different framework. And so that's one thing. This is really investing in restorative justice processes that are working and groups that are doing it, and where you're seeing their recidivism rate is it's infinitesimal. Their success rate is so great.
Cool.
Particularly when you're talking about teenagers.
Yeah.
You know, but so that's one thing. There's other things like violence interruption, where you have people who were formerly maybe gang members, people formerly very involved with violence and illegal activity in communities, who are now saying, we know where things are about to happen. We understand what's going on. If we can get there, we can de-escalate. We don't have to call the police. We don't have to bring in, you know. So there's violence interruption programs that are really strong. There's also programs where they call them, it's like hospital intervention, violence intervention, where when there's been violent crime, there are people immediately at the hospital to, again, help bring down the temperature, help figure out what the needs of the family of the person who's been harmed are. Because what we know in a lot of communities, retaliation is police are not trusted, and you get into this retaliation kind of mindset. And we also just know that we've been working, Jule, for 2 years with the victims advocates out in Tennessee and it's sort of interesting that Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty is now doing a lot of work on behalf of victims of violence. You know? And some people might go, and I'm like, no, it makes perfect sense, because we want to help anyone who's been impacted by violence. But we realize that our state's Tennessee Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund, which is a state fund for people last resort, can't pay for a funeral, need mental health counseling, need some help because you missed so much work, whatever it is, if you've experienced a violent crime, we realized 70% of people who were applying for that fund were being denied. For paperwork, not getting the right thing here or there, and a disproportionate number were people of color. And my colleague, who's a woman of color who lost her son to murder, who's been leading this effort, we worked very hard to get advocate for legislation that passed through both houses, sailed through, to expand access to that fund.
Cool.
change some of the rules of who can apply and how they apply and what paperwork and how long they have, and if can it be more than just the immediate family that gets help, and all these things. And so now we're working really hard. We're going to have a campaign that's going to be going on through the fall in the major cities, helping people understand what's available, because we realize, like, you've got people walking around who've just been through something horrific, who do not have, maybe they even lose their job because of it.
Right, yeah.
They can't, if someone's died, they can't afford the funeral. They're walking around with all kinds of trauma that's not
or maybe they've
been
seen
addressed. Right, or they're living in the midst of it.
Yeah.
So that's another. And I think, and I could probably go on, but one of the things that I think we just have to remember, and this is obviously sort of intuitive if you think about it, is if people are living in a situation where their basic needs are not being met, there is going to be violence.
Right.
And when you
Wasn't
look,
that Desmond Tutu?
Yeah,
there's hunger anywhere, there will always be violence.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to try to survive.
To have to. Right. Yeah.
And we may look at that and like not understand, but when people are living in certain contexts, they are trying to survive. And some of the, I've been reading a lot about restorative justice and people working in this area. And one woman who's done a lot of work said some of the most terrified people are the people who are violent.
Yeah.
They're acting out of their own fear.
They're acting out of their
trauma
brain,
and their fear.
right? Yeah, exactly.
And so, like, and again, I'm not Pollyanna thinking,
right.
we just, there's no one size fits all for this stuff.
Yeah.
But when you look at the situations in some of the most violent, in Tennessee, that would, be Shelby County, where Memphis is. You look at the history. You look at the wealth and who has it. You look at access to resources. You look at policing. All of these things.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying there's an easy answer to any of this, but doing more of the same
Is not
that
working.
we've been doing for however many years now, 40, 50 years, in the modern iteration of it, it's not working. If it was, Shelby County would be the safest place around.
Right. Yeah.
You see what I mean?
It's not.
And it's not.
It's not.
And Davidson County has its problems. I mean, I'm not picking on Shelby County, but it's just, it happens to have, a higher violent crime rate probably than any other of the urban areas in Tennessee. And so, again, it's just, but we have to be able to step back and ask ourselves some pretty hard questions.
Right.
And the easiest answer is, of course, lock people up or execute people.
Right.
I personally don't believe that there are disposable people. That's my theology.
Yeah. I don't know where you learned that.
I don't.
She's going to preach about that next week.
Isn't that wild?
He fed everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. Some guy named Jesus.
I know.
And he probably learned it from his mama.
I think he did.
Yeah.
Amen, sister. Talked about Mary Magdalene today. So, you're wearing red. It's awesome.
That's good. It's all good.
Yeah.
So anyway,
he did learn it from his mama.
He learned a lot from his mama. I guarantee you.
Yes, because there's always been that history of those who understand that God is in all things.
And
yes. We need to honor and bless. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and so that does, but sometimes it's like I need to know myself that God is in me.
Yes.
And in the other, so that I will not harm another. Because the divine in me is not going to seek to harm another.
That's right. Yes, we have. So, if there's not self-love, you can't love other people.
Yeah.
Or it's very hard to.
Exactly.
So. That was a long answer to your question, Jule.
No,
I don't even remember what your question was.
I love hearing about that. My last interview was with Dr. Rossi and Mr. Vincent Rossi. You can check that out on our same platforms. And we got into these questions and, just little micro kind of, here's what's happening in school, for instance. Yeah. And it's very racially charged. Right. It's like, what are we going to do, right? She did talk about restorative practices.
Yeah.
I did talk about the Truth and Reconciliation trials of South Africa, so I had no idea. I mean, it's a very similar
and that's another mechanism
to
have that in every school.
Right.
Every school should have some way to de-escalate, to help kids learn the skills to work out conflicts, because it's not intuitive.
Right.
And particularly if you're growing up in an environment that is very survival based, and that there is a lot of violence. You know, you're a wounded person walking around trying to navigate other wounded people. And so to teach our children how to do this is, you know, there's all these other layers of the violence that, you know, may be harder to deal with, but teaching a child how to do this and nurturing them in it, and, you know, that's something we can do. You know, if we have the will to do it.
It seems like that's happening. At least
I think it is.
Some of the Metro Nashville public schools.
And I think there is a recognition to some degree that the trauma, brain development with children and trauma, you know, the adverse childhood experiences. This is huge for future, the future of these children and the future of society.
Exactly.
And that there are mechanisms to look and say, okay, this child is really in the danger zone for really not good health outcomes, not good work outcomes, not good relationship outcomes, and may be heading for a really difficult and dark life.
And then the harm
the harm's going to flow out of that. You know, so again, you know, there is more of that awareness, I think, but
then in 1997 for sure.
For sure. But we're still we go in waves, you know, and we're in a dip right now, a wave of really punitive rhetoric that doesn't, in my opinion, give enough attention to causes and addressing root causes.
Wow. Cool. Well, that was a load full just in that question,
load full, Jule. I can talk.
Well, I know, like, in the work you're doing, I mean, that's what I mentioned about Stacy's passion, and you better be sharp when you're talking to her, because, like, she's on it, she knows, and, like, the work you're doing is so important, and, you know, I wonder what you see as, like, these are the gifts that I have that really... Obviously, storytelling, talking, communicating is a big gift that you have. Because, I mean, you have to be out there educating every time you're encountering anybody, whether it be a donor or somebody that you're working with, or even a person themselves that may be, you know, incarcerated. Right. So.
Yeah, I think having passion is really. I mean, because I don't even notice it sometimes in my own way. I'm talking and people are like, "Gosh, you're so passionate about this," and I'm like, "Oh, I mean, it's coming out." Like I don't, you know. But yeah, I mean, I do think I speak with a passion and an energy about it and a conviction about it. But what I've really worked on and have learned a lot is, you know, coming into this work, I was pretty self-righteous about it. You know, I was pretty like, how do you not see this the way I see this? Do you know what I mean? How do you read the Bible and not see it the way I do? You know what I mean? And I've been humbled a lot around that, and particularly learning from people who've been victims of violence and taking in the pain and the absolute devastation and lifelong harm and trauma. And being able to hold that at the same time holding the horrors of capital punishment. And you know, Sister Helen Prejean, who was the nun that she wrote Dead Man Walking, and then the movie came out with Susan Sarandon playing her, and fabulous. If you haven't seen Dead Man Walking, you
great
need to
movie,
see
great
Dead Man
movie,
Walking.
yes,
amazing movie.
And
Sister Helen's written other books, and that's been a gift of this work that I've gotten to know Sister Helen over time.
Oh, cool.
Wow. And I would say we're friends now. But my name dropping, I'm name dropping some Sister Helen on you. But she says, and this has just stuck with me, about Jesus reaching out on the cross as a victim of violence and dying as one who is a criminal. He was both at the same time. And in his outstretched arms, he embraces both.
Yeah.
Both those who harm and those who have been harmed.
Right.
And so that's been a real growth area for me. And I do feel like I'm in a place now where I have become a much better listener and much better at meeting people where they are and not needing them to be any particular place.
Yeah.
You know, so that I can simply have a conversation, hear what they're saying, affirm their real fears, their real outrage, all that stuff, and at the same time share some of what I think. But that need to be right is gone.
Yeah.
It's gone, and that's
Life
such a
kind
gift.
of like, rubs that off.
It does. Life does, and particularly in this work,
You're in the ministry, right? So,
yeah. But I think I'm good at putting myself in the shoes of other people, even people I vehemently disagree with, and really sometimes they get on my last nerve.
Yeah.
I'm still though able, I think, to, and part of it probably is being raised in rural West Tennessee where these are my people, a lot of them that I don't see eye to eye with, but I can think about who they are and their context and what they've been taught and what they've experienced in their lives, and be able to not agree and not be bold in my conviction, but do it with love and humility to the degree that I'm able to do that. And that, it just makes a huge difference.
Right.
As any of us know.
Yeah.
When someone's coming to you to talk to you and they're actually listening and they're actually not assuming you're wrong and they're right.
Right.
Because you can feel that. You pick up on it.
It's an energetic thing.
It is. And so learning to really be in a space where I'm not doing that to other people. I don't want people doing that to me.
Right.
That's, I think that's really helped the work. And we work with, in this very, very, very polarized time, our movement works with everybody.
Yeah.
And that can be, I feel like some days I'm living in a social experiment because on my own staff,
right.
I've got a very, very, very conservative woman of color doing work with conservatives. I have a very progressive woman of color doing her work in very different circles, and then our movement is that we have victims of violence, we have family members of those who've committed horrible crimes, we have conservatives, we have progressives, we have independents, we have, people of faith, people of who don't proclaim any faith, whatever. And so you're just
or people of varieties
of faith, and you're in this people with a lot of trauma, and so it's a very hard, it can be a very hard place to be in community.
Right. Yeah.
And so we've had to, and really worked very intentionally for a lot of years now on the white supremacy issues in our work, not just in the world, but in ourselves and our work. That's not an easy thing to tackle.
Yeah.
So it's, I've grown, it's that whatever is a cliche, the older you get, the less you know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how I feel.
Right.
I realize the older I get, the less I know, except what I know is, and this gets, I think, one of your questions in my paperwork was, what's your mantra?
Yes, yeah. I'll just go right to the mantra.
Love God, love neighbor, love self.
Oh, I don't know where you heard that either.
I don't either.
So, yeah.
That's it.
Very biblical.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, that's extremely hard to do sometimes.
Exactly. Right.
But to me, that's what it boils down to. Am I doing this out of love? Yeah. As I understand it in this moment, what I'm saying, what I'm doing, is it out of love? And if it's not, then I need to step back.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, if we as a Christian, non-Christian, whatever, if we can be motivated to the degree that, it is out of a self-giving love.
Yeah.
Then if we're doing more of that and not worrying so much about right belief, right allegiance, right behavior, right group, right status.
Yeah.
We weren't worried about that stuff. We were just concerned about what I'm doing. How is that showing love?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, this is not original material.
It is not. It's not original. You know, as you were talking about Jesus earlier, and we joked about his mama, but I mean, his mama is a great example of a victim of violence who yet is still trying to love. I mean, her son is executed.
Yes.
She experiences all that trauma according to the scriptures.
Yes.
She's actually there witnessing it, depending on, you know, which gospel you're reading.
Right.
And yet, you know, the tradition is that she remained a person of immense love and open-hearted. And, you know, we don't get all the stories in the Bible about Mary the Mother, and yet there are lots of legends and traditions and people today who are praying to her or praying, you know, whatever the right thing we're supposed to say about
it.
You know,
they believe she's a very powerful,
through her
spiritual idea.
The rosary itself calling upon her. And so I'm sure, I mean, maybe in Tennessee you don't have many people praying the rosary that you're working with. You may not be working with as many Catholics.
Well, there are, you know, there are just not as many Catholics in Tennessee as other states, but there are, you know, the Catholic Church is one of those churches that is very consistent. And since, well, Pope John Paul and Pope Francis too, you know, Pope Francis in particular saying there is no place for the death penalty. The Catholics for a while said if there's not another option to keep society safe, then you could have it. That's no longer because there is. And so yes, there. But you know, then again, you've got very different in our work. You've got people with very different thoughts on what does pro-life mean, you know, and all this. But certainly Mary. You know, and I think about Jule, we don't know too much about her, you know, generally, but what she went through, frankly, carrying Jesus as an unwed mother.
Exactly.
And what do we think she was, like?
Maybe somewhere between 13 and 15.
Yeah. Young teenage girl.
Which I'm sure you have dealt with some young teenage girls who are pregnant. Right?
And what that was like for her.
Yeah.
You know, and there's so many like ways that she could have been embittered and instead, you know, she found strength in obedience to this love that she had experienced. That let it be, you know. Right. So I do think Jesus learned a lot from her.
Yes, and, definitely. And
you
know, in my experience in the Holy Land, you have been on pilgrimage there.
I have not.
Years ago. It was
you did. Okay, you've been.
Rocky.
Someday.
You'll get there. You'll get there. Hopefully before you retire.
Yes.
But it's amazing because it does bring everything to life in a new way. Like to actually be there. I mean, it's not that far from Galilee to Jerusalem. It's like 100 miles. You know, like.
Of course, they were walking.
But still, it was like a couple days walk. But that's not that far if you think about geographically.
No,
is your hometown 100 miles away?
Yeah, it's more than 100. I was trying to think. It's kind of probably between here and maybe like the Tennessee River or something.
Yeah, so not that far.
Yeah,
and there was just that sense that like. It's the first time I ever, you know, we're Protestants. We don't see a lot of images, I know. But it's the first time I actually saw the Holy Family, like, together in this huge way. And there was a realization, like, as we were in Bethlehem, as we were in Nazareth, like, the Church of Mary is right next to the Church of Joseph in Nazareth. And, like, he had a role. Like, there was a way that he was protective and involved in it as well. And so... yeah, it's just that sense of she was a force. Yes. She was a Jewish mother, you know.
Yes, she was.
She was a force
who had strong beliefs and, you know, the Magnificat, you know, lest we forget, like
exactly. Right. And like I know this isn't the Bible, but I do believe she was a part of a community that was already like preparing for this way of love. There they were Jewish people, but there were sects we know that were living in perhaps in the Dead Sea or whatever those kind of areas, Qumran community, and like preparing for this kind of salvation to come that would raise us out of, I mean, a very horrible situation to begin with, being occupied by Rome, this Roman Empire that was putting its peace upon everybody.
That's right.
So let's not count out Mama Mary.
No, can't do it.
We're still good.
And all the mamas out there.
All the mamas out there. Yeah, like, because, you know, somebody's child may have shot and killed somebody else, right? And so there's a way that the mother and the father, right, whoever the father is like broken at that as well. Who can be okay after that?
Well,
right?
and I hear that a lot from moms who've lost kids to murder, to say, if there was anybody in that courtroom that was more, if it's possible to be more traumatized than I am, it's the mother of the person who did this.
Right.
And the bond that there is there, even despite the horror that one son or daughter has inflicted on another, the mothers, you know, being able to see that pain in each other.
Because it's like the devastation of your child.
It's
whichever kind of, I mean, it's not the same, I get it, but it's still, there is
a
way that
they're both losing their child.
Is broken.
And you know, so, and in fact, this campaign that's going on this summer that we're involved with, we're doing it with a group called Mothers Over Murder, who are moms, and mostly moms of color, who've lost children, and who are just saying, enough of this. Like, we've got to figure out something here. There can't continue to be more and more and more and more of us. You know? And it's powerful. I mean, it's a powerful thing. So I say it all the time. I'm like, if everybody just get out of the way and let these moms.
I bet those moms would figure it out.
They would. I mean, and because they are coming at it as all of us have children that we love. And how are we going to take care of our kids? So, it's mamas ought to listen to them.
I know. I love it. I actually quoted Mandela in our last interview as well, who, you know, you've been in South Africa. That's where you did your sabbatical.
Yes.
I didn't go to South Africa on my sabbatical. I went other places. But I had been to South Africa a couple times, including Robben Island, where there was that awareness. You've been there, right?
Yes.
That awareness kind of, it was either there or at the museum in Cape Town. Either place that there had been just bloodshed in that land for forever.
So long.
He's like, this, again, like Mom was saying, like, this has to stop. There can't be more
we
of
can't
this.
keep doing
Like, violence is going to just continue to perpetuate violence.
It's going to bleed us dry.
Yeah.
So there's nothing left.
Right.
You know.
So.
So true. Yeah.
Do you know what the Presbyterian Church USA's stance on the death penalty is?
Yeah, the PCUSA has been
but...
opposed for years.
Okay.
I mean, I want to say even back in the 50s.
Oh, wow.
I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
I'll need to go back and check. But obviously, they've reaffirmed their opposition through the years.
Okay.
So, yes, the PCUSA is clear that they're opposed to the death penalty, you know, because of the Imago Dei, the image of God, the redeeming love of Jesus that can change any heart, and, you know, the power of forgiveness and mercy, and that violence is a unending cycle. All the things, right? Like just, and that there are alternatives to this that totally mean it is not ever a necessity.
Right.
You know, and so that there are alternative ways of dealing with it. So
and trying to get to like root causes.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And the whole notion, you know, that the thing, and it is, there are more and more people who would identify as evangelical, who are asking questions around what does it mean to be a pro-life Christian. What does that mean? Is there a place for the death penalty in that conversation?
Right. Yeah.
And the other question is the redemption question. You know, we talk about redemption, and it's at the core of the gospel, is that we're loved, we're accepted, we're freed and forgiven, and that changes us.
And then we're to do that with others.
Right,
Give the same thing out
exactly.
to others.
And so, what does that look like when somebody's done something heinous? And, you know, there is no more powerful, for me, two of the most powerful things I've experienced is the forgiveness of someone who's lost a loved one to murder, being able to get to a place where they are moving toward forgiveness. Some of them get there, some of them don't.
Right.
But the posture of saying, I'm open, God, help me.
Right.
Move in this direction.
Yeah.
And when you see that and you experience that, you know, to me, I said, Jesus walking on water, that's great.
Right.
This, that's God.
Right.
I mean, when you see that happening, it's incredible. But at the same time, when you see someone who has been in some of the most horrific abuse, neglect I've ever seen or read about are the backgrounds of the people that are sitting on our death row. And death rows across this country.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you talk about an ACE scale from 1 to 10, you know, and everybody falls on this scale of had some trauma in our lives, right? But not a lot of people have had 8, 9s, and 10s.
Right.
And we're talking the worst kinds of abuse, the worst kinds of neglect, you know. Almost everybody out there, if not everybody, is in that category.
That's on death row.
Yeah. I mean, horrific abuse.
Yeah.
Many have brain injuries. Many have mental health problems. Many, you know, were in the throes of severe addictions. You know, I mean, just so many things, right? And when you see, and again, please hear me, it doesn't excuse anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But it helps us understand it.
Right.
And it helps us think about what do we need to do to prevent this, and how do we deal with this one who did something we can't comprehend. Right? We really can't wrap our heads around it, right?
Yeah, right.
But when you see that person who honestly has never, in some circumstances, or almost never experienced an actual loving relationship, or any sort of compassion, you know, and when they have that experience and really are changed by it,
right?
You talk about powerful.
That is the movie.
That's
That's Sean Penn's character, right?
Exactly,
right.
But to see
it does happen in real life. Yeah,
violent people just get a little bit of love and ability to grow as a human being.
And like
even in a secure environment, right?
Loving connection,
have connections,
and begin to learn empathy.
Begin to learn. Just learn,
right?
You know, so many of them. You know, many of them do have disabilities, but some of them, you know, were dropped out of school at 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. I mean, you know, not like to learn basic things that they never knew, to be able to learn to read and read about things, you know, read scripture, read poetry, you know, just all these things. Like it's just,
right.
You know, that just change them to the core, you know, and you're just like, it's breathtaking, you know, and that's it. That's the gospel.
Yeah. Right.
That's it. And I'm just like, it almost brings me to tears when I feel like I'm so profoundly, as hard as the work is, I'm so profoundly privileged to get to even be a spectator in that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's just, I'll tell you a story.
Get a story.
Yeah. It's a sad story, but it's a happy story too. So I visited a man on death row for 10 years. Steve Henley was his name. And I did not know Steve. again, when I moved to Nashville, I got involved with different ministries, and one of them was a Visitation on Death Row program, was matched up with him, started writing letters, and then had our first visit in 1999, the summer of 1999. And I visited Steve every other week for 10 years until he was executed in 2009.
Oh, wow.
And I was he had wanted me to be his spiritual advisor. He was very much like an older brother. And that was kind of he had kids about my age. And he grew up on a farm up on the plateau, real close to his grandparents. You know, we had some similar, I could really relate to him in some ways, and he could relate to me in some ways. And, you know, Steve, I've learned part of the deal of visiting at that, and still I think the right thing is you're not there to talk about what happened or what, because they've got attorneys and they don't need to be talking about that. But you're just there to be a friend and to be, you know. But along the way, as you grow closer, you often do learn about the case and learn about things that went on, and I did, and you know, it was a real mess of a case, and there were two men that were Steve and his co-defendant, who the co-defendant provided all the incriminating evidence against Steve. Steve got the death penalty. The co-defendant got 25 years and was out in 5.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, it was real questionable what happened, who was responsible. It was a mess. But when he was going to be executed, I could be with him and at that time they executed at 1 a.m. They've changed that since, thank goodness. But I could be with him from 9 to 11 on death watch. And then at 11, I had to go out. I had to be with the family and the media witnesses, and then they moved us around and got us into the witnessing room. But from 9 to 11, I could be with him. But we had bars between us. He was on this side, I was on this side. And there was an officer sitting like where you're sitting, basically. And, you know, I just wasn't sure. Like, as he said, Stacy, there's no manual for what you do to get ready for this. Like, there's not, you know, and I had communion. We had communion, and we talked, and he was so calm and so at peace. It was really incredible. But the thing he said, and Steve was pretty anxious and he could get real worked up, and you know, I need you to do this for me. You got to help me do. You know, I was getting a lot of that calls before, and so I didn't know. I thought he could be really like his blood pressure would go sky high, and you know. None of that. It was total peace, total calm. And I said, Steve, you are just like, this is a little weird. Like how peaceful you are right now.
You are, yeah.
And he said, I don't know what, I can't explain it. And I said, well, maybe it's the peace that passes all understanding. Like, maybe this is it. And he said, well, I don't know. He said, I just am so tired. And it was very much like a terminally ill person who's fought, and then realizes
no more fight.
It's done. You know. And we talked about the thief on the cross with Jesus and remember me, and he was saying it over and over, you know, like he was practicing. Jesus, remember me. Jesus, remember me. And then he says, you know, Stacy, he says, all in all, I'm a lucky man. I said, okay, you're going to have to unpack that. I was like, a little levity. I was like, Steve, it is 9:30. You know, you're on death row. I hope it doesn't happen, but you may be executed. You have to tell me why you're lucky right now. He was kind of laughing. You know, we were cutting out, but you have to. Like, you know.
Right. It's
and
intense.
He kind of grinned and he said, well, here's how I figure it. He said, a lot of people in the free world ain't been loved the way I have.
Aww.
And I said, brother, bingo.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
Hold on to that.
Yeah.
Hold on to that every second. And Jule, he was the most composed of anybody in that entire process.
Yeah.
I mean, including the officers, everybody. He was just calm. He was trying to he was trying to make his kids laugh. And then, he was just very earnest about his sorrow, about all of it. And he was so sorry for the family. He, but he didn't commit the crime. But it was just the dignity with which he was able to go through that. It was such a gift. And I do think, like, in the end, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's a gift. Like, but he was able to focus in on the love.
Right.
And feel compassion and love toward the people, for whom the people who fought for him to be executed.
Right.
He obviously had that. He had that for the victims' families. But, I mean, you could just see that all that bitterness was gone.
Wow.
There wasn't any of it there.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, he's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, this is...
Now you all are left to deal with it.
But I've told people, that saved me.
Yeah.
Like, because he kept saying, girl, don't you let this traumatize you now.
Right.
And I was like, well, Steve, I'm not going to be traumatized because look at you.
Right.
You're at peace and you're full of love. And you've been through hell. And whether people think you deserve it or not is not the point. You've been through it. And, and I did say to him, I said, Jesus is here in a way with you, and you are with him in a way that most people never experience it. Because he's been where you are.
Right, yeah.
I mean, so much about it.
Yeah, I know. How do you preach Good Friday after that?
Yeah, but when you read the scriptures, and in fact, I know somebody a lawyer that used to do Jesus on trial because he took scripture and then put it like kind of in our context of what this would look like, and it's very similar.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of similarities.
I've seen the pit he was held in. Under Caiaphas's house. Yeah, so.
But you just
but you don't think about that. But
right,
that's
you see the similarities,
right,
and it was just as horrifying as it was, there was something so holy about it. And again, it's gift. I don't know where it came from. Well, I do, but why Steve was able to receive it in that way, in that moment, I don't know, but he was.
Yeah.
And because of that, he was able to give love even as his life was being taken, to his family, to me, and it allowed for me not to be, I mean, it's a trauma and I'll live with it for the rest of my life, but it could have been so much worse.
Right. Right. If you were like watching somebody who's still
fighting and that happens.
It does.
And God's just as with those people as God was with Steve, right? I mean, I'm making note, God is there no matter what's going on. But there was something about, for whatever reason, he was able to receive that in that moment. Again, gift. Yeah. That was a gift to me.
Yeah.
That spared me and everybody watching it. And the execution did not go properly, and so we had to see that.
Yeah.
But just again, like knowing he was held in love and was in a space of love, just made all the difference in being able to get through something like that.
Yeah.
And you just hope every person, and I know in the worst, most horrific situations, I have to believe, and I do believe, God is most present. Even as Jesus is dying on the cross, right? He didn't feel it.
Right. He felt separated.
He felt separated. He felt forsaken.
Yeah.
It's not about how we feel.
Right.
I believe firmly God is right there.
Agreed.
And so, but it's just profound stuff that I've been able to be a part of. I feel like it's so much more gift than. The work is hard.
It is hard
but when you are given these profound glimpses of that kind of love at work in people's lives, It makes you be able to keep it going.
Exactly.
And like, okay, God is in this, and I've just been invited along. It's not what I'm doing.
Right.
It's I'm showing up and letting God work.
Be the vessel.
Yes, exactly. Because heaven knows if I'm in charge, we're in big trouble. Even though I like to be.
I know,
like
Stacy, and I think that's probably true.
Oh, it's totally true. It's totally true.
Except for there might be some levity if you put on an Elvis costume now.
That's possible. It's another hidden talent. Yes.
Yeah. I have 2 questions from that story, and I guess the first one I'll ask has to do with, okay, those who are around, first of all, how many people do we execute in a year in Tennessee?
Well, we haven't. Tennessee's we've always been an ambivalent state. And so we just don't know exactly how we feel about it. You know what I mean? And so from 2000, when we resumed in the modern era, 1960 went 40 years, nothing. 2000 we started. We went from 2000, get this right, to 2009, which was the year Steve was executed. And then there were 2 people executed that year, and Steve was the only one that had an autopsy. The other had religious objections. There were horrible problems with Steve's watching it and the autopsy, so things stopped. Because it was legal challenges. So we went through another kind of hiatus from 2009 to 2018. They, quote unquote, fixed lethal injection, which is
not true, but that's
obviously not true. And we're in a hiatus again because of it. But 2018 to 2020, Nick Sutton was executed in February, and then COVID shut everything down. So in 2022, we had 5 people scheduled to be executed in Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
And April 2022, just prior to 1 hour prior to Oscar Smith's execution, Governor Lee stopped it because he became aware of a problem with the lethal injection protocol. So we've been on a hold since then. So 13 people have been executed since 2000 in Tennessee.
Wow.
We have about 45. We've had a couple people get off death row in the last year or so because of intellectual disability claims, but about 45
are on death row.
And most of them, only 3 new death sentences in Tennessee since 2013. Which means the majority of people sitting out there were put in there in the 80s and the 90s. So many of them would not get death today. And so you've got this arbitrary timing. And then you get into the issues about people that are in there, with severe mental illness, people that are in there with intellectual disability that have not had the proper procedures to show that they have it, people that are in there for what's called felony murder, which means they were part of a felony and someone died. They may or not have been responsible for that person's death. But they're the ones on death row for it. So all this mess, Jule. But I digress. You were going somewhere.
No, well, because it just makes me think about, as you were talking about all the people who were a part of Steve's, just that night. And I understand there's probably more than just one doctor involved and whatnot.
No doctors involved.
No doctors. So who's involved? Oh, because doctors have an oath, do no harm. Okay, good.
Correctional officers prepare everything.
And are there multiple ones who are preparing it?
We don't really know.
But still, to think about a correctional officer
it's horrible,
who is sitting there with you the whole time, and what kind of trauma is
when
them,
they go and when these executions go wrong.
Exactly, and they have to deal with it.
This is a profound question, and we have more and more correctional officers and wardens and former commissioners coming out saying it's too much. Asking
too much for one human being to do
asking state employees
who
are overworked and underpaid,
don't get enough money to begin with,
overworked and underpaid, to come in to be asked to take someone who's in our state been out there 30 years, who almost never, you don't ever hear any real issues on death row. These are older men. They're not causing trouble. They're not, and you're asking these folks to take this human being who is a threat to no one, who's incarcerated and has been for 30 years,
Right.
go through this ritual, bringing them in, strapping them down, and now we use also the electric chair here still because the men can choose the chair or a lethal injection after if they were sentenced prior to 99, and thus far since 2018, most of them have been choosing the chair. They're terrified of lethal injection.
Wow.
So now you're talking about shaving, putting a sponge, strapping them down to this chair, doing the, you hope they don't catch on fire, which has happened. I mean, this is brutal stuff to be talking about, but like,
awful.
You're asking a person to do this,
right?
And then go,
like, live your life.
Go take your child in,
and
then.
Spouse and
thankfully we have Commissioner
go to worship on
Commissioner Gail Ray, who is a Presbyterian. Gail, when she was commissioner, made sure that it was mandatory. I believe she told me. I hope I'm getting this right, Gail, that people absolutely have to go to mental health.
Definitely,
but that may not have stuck. I mean,
exactly.
I don't know what kind of help is available,
right?
But what we're hearing from people who do come out and start to talk about it is, this was a horrible trauma, and I tried to live with it, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
So even if people don't have compassion for the people who've committed these heinous crimes, I say think about all the other people that are involved.
Yeah.
And what we're putting them through and asking them to do on our behalf.
Right. We just think about everybody who's fighting wars, right? And the trauma we know that causes to them and their families, and the decades of PTSD and often not getting the healing they need. And I understand it's not exactly the same, but yet this is not with intention. This is your job that you are to do this. Right. And yes, there's been charged with this.
And it's one thing to say, I don't have any problem killing somebody that's done something like that.
Right.
It's one thing to say that.
Right.
It's another thing to take a human being that's been there for 30 years, who's now maybe 65 or, 55, who people know who is the guy who mops the floors every day. And, this is not, you're taking them and they're shackled. They're absolutely of no threat in any way, shape, or form to anyone. And you're strapping them down and intentionally killing them.
Right.
I mean, you can paint that any way you want in terms of rationalizing and justifying, and that's okay. If you want to do that. People do it all the time. But when you're asking, they're not the ones doing it.
You're right.
They're all the folks
they are
out there.
Innocent,
And you know who's
citizens.
Not there? Jule, the governor's not there.
Oh, yeah, the people who are
the attorney general's not there.
Right.
Speaker of the House isn't there.
Yeah.
The Senate leader's not
there.
there.
Are the lawyers even there?
The lawyer, there has to be a lawyer present for the person being executed to ensure that their rights are not being violated.
Okay.
It may be their own lawyer or it may not. Sometimes some lawyers choose, like, if I'm going to be able to do my work, I cannot watch my client die.
Yeah.
Like, I have invested, some of these lawyers have been on these cases for decades.
Right.
And they're like, I cannot be the one.
Right.
You know, so they will get someone else. Some of them feel very strongly they need to be the one. It just depends. But it's always bothered me so much that those who are so oftentimes, and whether they're for it or against it, they're the people in the state that are creating the laws, enforcing the laws, and ultimately the governor has an absolute ability to stop it at any time. Can not sign that death warrant. So to me, at minimum, you're asking the state employees to do this. Get out there.
Right. Yeah.
Go be there and be a part of what's
happening.
Be there.
Yeah.
you know.
When you have that much authority, because with authority comes responsibility.
Absolutely.
Right?
And to me, it's way easier to talk big about it.
Yeah.
When you're not proximate to what's going on.
Yeah, when you're not the one sitting there with Steve as he's waiting.
Right. And so I do think correctional officers, it is not fair in any way, shape, or form what we ask them to do.
Then there needs to be supports for them, and
100%.
probably all along the way, like not just at the end, right? But like all along the way,
right? Yes.
So that their own hearts don't become totally hardened,
right?
That they're not living in their own little prison,
right?
From the work that they're doing
and what they have to witness and see, and you can't unsee it.
Oh my! There's a good reason there's a pastor in this process, right? Because
it's heavy stuff. I mean, and sometimes I kind of. Sometimes if I'm talking to people, they'll be like, okay, you have to stop talking now. I can't take any more.
Yeah.
And I get it. I'm like, please just tell me to stop. Because I'm
right.
in it so deep all the time.
Right.
That I lose perspective sometimes about, like, this is awfully heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And, at some point people have to say, that's all. I need a break from it, you know. And I do too.
I was going to say, what do you do to get your, like, that's all I need a break from it?
Well, I mean,
so
thankfully,
you get to your mat,
I do talk
yoga.
about, I do, I have been in therapy, still am.
You got to have somebody you process
Yes,
with. Yeah.
and I, like I said, I walk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my prayer time, my quiet time. I go into nature, music, yoga, all of those things.
I was thinking too about dreams. We've worked dreams together before, and so thinking about the dreams that all of that impacting your dreams, but also like what gets a correctional officer, even the victim, and those accused, like the dreams that must come. Do you ever work dreams with anybody in those, or is like, no, we just don't go there? It's too weird.
Well, it's funny. I don't dream about the work very
That's
much.
awesome. That's good.
I don't. It's stuff that's, it just doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't come up. I mean,
the energies are maybe getting worked out, but the dream itself is all different.
I mean, I may have had a dream where someone is in the dream. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, my friend Steve might be in a dream, but it's not. He's not being executed. Right. It's something totally, which is a gift that I'm not having nightmares and stuff about this stuff. I generally don't.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's a good sign of some good boundaries.
I hope so.
I'm thinking about the Enneagram, and I'm like, you must not be identifying as a 4 on the Enneagram.
Oh, no, I'm a hard 1.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But then you integrate to 4. No, you disintegrate to 4.
Oh,
you
maybe
integrate to 4?
I don't know, Jule. You know way more about that than me.
I'm like, okay, viewers, I'm so sorry. I'm having like a little brain fog.
Sorry. Well, I've just laid some heavy stuff on you.
So you disintegrate to 4.
Okay.
So you could potentially you integrate to 7.
Okay.
I believe. But that's cool because that's like the fun.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right. Sorry, viewers, if I have that wrong. I know Maddie is out there like, Jule, how are you getting this wrong?
You can tell me anything, Jule. I'll just say you're right.
Yes, Jule's right.
Jule's right. Of course.
No, but like if you were a 4 on the Enneagram, like drawn to the dark and all that kind of stuff, and like the gloom and the difficulty, whatever, like the shadow of the world, like it would be too much.
Yeah. I think so.
So to have those good boundaries and to have time to like go have fun. And,
and I think I can be a like kind of that dry humor, kind
oh my God, hysterical.
Yeah, a little bit cynical at times, but I feel like I'm very hopeful person, and so if you didn't have hope,
right,
you couldn't do the work.
Right, like, you wouldn't be in this work.
No, you can, and to see, I just believe very, very strongly that there will come a day when there is no more death penalty, and that we will. Now we're never going to be there totally. It's always going to be hanging over us as humans, because it's our reptilian, but that we can continue to move toward a different way of dealing with violence and people who offend us, both individually and communally, that we can move toward a different way of engaging with them. And again, it's not new. It's things that ancient people did.
Right.
Native Americans have done these processes for years. I mean, this is not new stuff. It's just we moved into this lock 'em up mode, and there's been industries built on it, and there's a whole system now.
Big money.
Yeah,
system.
it's all these things are going to have to be
changed.
Yeah, I mean, dismantled. I don't even know, or at least there's going to have to be an alternative way. Even if this thing's still here, there's going to have to be a different
so that
path
there's
forward.
less and less and less.
Exactly. So there's not just one thing, right? But my point being is, I believe that in the core of my being, and so so that keeps me going, because I don't, and people are like, how do you do it, and all this craziness out there, and I was like, well, I just don't believe that the craziness has the last word.
Well, I mean, people of faith, right? Like at the end of the day, no, I mean, love wins. That's
it.
The story.
I mean, I say that to my over and over to myself.
Yeah.
And lead with faith and not with fear.
Right.
Do not let us, as people of the way, allow our fear to be our primary motive.
Yes.
Because that is so much of what I see. And sadly, from the institution, Christendom, whatever, in its iteration, part of its iteration, now in our current climate, is fear-based.
Right.
It's not faith or love-based.
Oh, we could get into this, for
right?
Sure.
And so, and that breaks my heart. I mean, it upsets me, it angers me, but it also breaks my heart, because that's a horrible way to live.
Exactly. Right. To be afraid all the time.
All the time.
Right.
And how do we, as people of the way, followers of Jesus, how do we live it and try to embody it, and make that a central tenet of what we're doing, is helping people. Yeah, there is lots of scary stuff out there.
Right.
But fear is optional.
Exactly. Right. Do you know that beautiful prayer?
I don't know.
I think it's by, you're like, don't you know that beautiful prayer? I'm not talking about the Lord's Prayer. I think it's by Dennis, Louis, I think might be. He's an Australian cartoonist, actually, and there's this beautiful prayer. There are only two things: love and fear. If you don't know it, I need to send it to you.
Oh, you absolutely
I need to send it to you.
Okay.
When we go to spiritual direction training with the Haight Institute, they plaster that before us. Like, there's only two things: love and fear. There's only two orientations, two actions, two on and on and on behaviors.
I believe that.
Love and fear. That's it.
Well, and Dr.
I think I have it in my Bible.
Yeah, that's basically what Jesus said.
Exactly.
And Dr. Brueggemann, when I had him, he always said the opposite. Well, the opposite. There's different. You can say the opposite of faith is certainty, which I think. But also the opposite of faith is not doubt; it's fear. You know what I mean? It's along those same. Doubt's not a problem.
Right.
Doubt's often a good thing.
Yeah.
But the fear and not being aware of what is motivating me. It goes back to my whole thing with my own personal self-awareness, because I can be as scared. I mean, I'm an anxious little person. Anxious little soul, always have been. But, so I'm always self-checking, like, is this coming out of my fear? What's this coming out of? And to the degree that I can be aware, to intentionally say, okay, I'm scared to death, but I'm not going to respond out of that.
Yeah, right.
Because I think people think somehow you're saying you're not
like you don't have
anymore. I'm
fear anymore.
Oh, please.
But
I'm scared of everything.
I'm an energy healer, that, right?
Oh, yes.
So I'm a healing touch practitioner, and this is how the limbic system works.
Yes.
We know this, right?
Yeah.
So immediately you get the signal, and you go into lizard brain, right? The brain stem. So now this may be where people are committing crimes on it. This is not frontal lobe work,
Right.
usually, even if there's a mastermind behind it.
Right. No,
But,
it's not frontal lobe work.
This is brainstem.
Yeah.
And so I do a lot of work with clients on I think this week I did 3 of the 3 clients. I did the connection to reconnect the amygdala and re-energize. And it always is you connect the amygdala back to the adrenals and back to the root chakra. So it's all a way that you reconnect this system so that people are living out it. And it ends at your heart space, actually.
There you go.
At your heart space.
Yeah.
Because immediately when we get that signal,
Yes.
oh, it's not a stick, it's a snake, right? Immediately we get hijacked,
Right.
if you will.
Right.
And things like yoga, walking, breath work, prayer, all of those help calm down the hijacking.
Remind you, let you go back to the heart, go back to the breath.
Get back connected to the earth.
Yes,
right,
and remember, okay, this is not, I don't have to live into that. I can live into something. I can experience that.
Yes.
It's real and it's going to happen and it's part of it, but I don't, that doesn't have to motivate me.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
and hijack me.
Hijack
my amygdala, hijack my system, and now I'm going to do harm to myself and others when I'm acting out of
Exactly.
that. And so the energy can get stuck, and so you can kind of think about the loop that ends up happening.
Yeah.
It's not the energy's not necessarily getting to the frontal lobe.
Right.
If you will.
Right.
And so
it's just
getting
sticking
to the heart.
Yeah.
And there's not connection between the adrenal glands and what connects us, what grounds us.
Right.
That's why people talk about grounding.
Right.
And I love that you're walking outside. I don't know if you know, we have a new community partner here. Not that new to us, but that does forest therapy right here on the grounds.
Oh,
so
nice.
People are being trained in how do I re-engage with nature that allows me to just get grounded back in my body, make better choices, have less, chronic health issues.
Absolutely. I don't know what, being outside, walking is so critical to my existence.
Right.
As a loving, sane human being.
Right.
I just need it.
Right. Yeah.
And I always have. Maybe when I was a little bitty. I lived on a farm, and my folks back then, I would just go out wandering around on the farm, and the cemetery, the church cemetery, I grew up out in the country, and the little cemetery was connected to our farm. And that was one of my favorite places to go.
Oh,
I would go as little, and I'd just go sit there. And I wasn't necessarily aware of why it was so peaceful, but I think my ancestors were there.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful spot, and there was a big tree, and I would just lay there and be, and so early on, my wiring, I think, sought out that, because I was, so vigilant in every part of my life, but that was where I could
decompress. I love to play outside too.
It's the best.
I know. Yeah, so walking outside is important. Well, I think we have talked about the challenges. Are we ready to wrap up?
Probably. We could probably sit here all day.
I know.
At some point, my blood sugar is going to drop.
I know.
I may just
we
pass
probably
out,
should. You've already talked about. Just repeat your mantra. I ask all my guests this at the end.
Love God, love neighbor, love self.
There you go.
Love,
pretty easy.
Love. All you need.
All you need is love. Sing, girl, right? So, I know. And it's a choice. And it's not a feeling. Love is not a feeling.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
It's acting on behalf of another.
Yeah. And it is an open-hearted choice, right?
Yeah.
I know I can feel when it's heart's closed and nothing's getting in, right?
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and we just have to sometimes, choosing love, and that's hard a lot of times. But
sometimes it's hard to know what that looks like, especially
how
when
does
you're
that
talking
play
about
out?
Accountability for
that's
heinous things that happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it's, but I think when we are thinking about, for me, accountability is love. Punishment, not so much.
torture, punishment, right? That's not right.
You have to have accountability
Right.
for both the person who was harmed and the person who committed the harm, because
Right.
they cannot become who they really are
Yeah.
if they have not been able to face that.
Right.
And there has to be a mechanism, whatever that mechanism is, for them to do that.
Right.
And for it to have meaning and for it to have an impact.
Yeah.
You know, so, but what we're doing currently, I don't think really gets at accountability.
But I'm gonna hold on to that group. It was called the Raphael group. Is it?
It's
Not Raphael.
RAPHAH. Rafa. Because it's
okay.
Hebrew for.
We should know
We should
our
know
Hebrew.
this. Yeah, I just heard him say, but it's a Hebrew word.
Okay.
And that's where they claimed it.
Does that have anything to do with breath? No, probably not.
That's ruach.
Dr. Brueggemann is very disappointed in
Ruach.
us right now because we've both been students.
I know ruach. I don't know
I know.
Rafa.
Rafa.
Yeah.
Probably has something to do with Raphael, the angel. Anyway,
know.
but there's
It's a
but
great,
that's happening.
great.
That's
Yes.
happening.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That wasn't happening in '99 when you started
No.
on,
No.
right? So
No.
that's a way we can be hopeful that there's
No, there are
new
all
things
sorts of
taking
things
place.
going on out in the country that are incredibly powerful and that are showing real ways of doing this differently.
Right.
That are working.
Well, and just to think about like psychology itself as a young field, and then
Right.
neuroscience and
Right.
what we know about the brain today, we didn't know that in the 90s.
Right.
You and I were raised in an age where we didn't know about alternative ways of learning, right?
Right.
And
No,
things
no.
like that.
No,
It's
no.
like, no, you were one in the Enneagram, so you probably love the
I
structure of
excelled.
school.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like if you're a kinesthetic kid who's
Yeah.
got like whatever jitteries in the body, but
Yeah.
what happened when we were growing up, those kids were like, sit
Uh-huh.
down, follow the rules, get
Right.
back in your desk, put that away, stop
And
having
they-
your
and they
pencils,
were
stop having
miserable.
your light. Yeah.
That's
they couldn't
cool.
do it. And
Yeah.
so what happened? Their nervous systems
Right.
got shot, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
okay, so my next question has to do, let's just go to resources.
Oh. Okay.
And they might have like some resources about like if I wanted to know more about restorative justice practices or like readings or teachers
Yeah.
that really have influenced
Just
you
thinking
in
about
your,
it, as you're
or
saying-
anything
As
fun
you're saying this,
that
Joel,
you
like,
do.
we ought to put that on our website, some
You
restorative
probably
justice.
should.
Yeah. Our website for people to know is TennesseeDeathPenalty.org.
Yes,
There's a
okay.
lot on there just about the work we're doing and you know some of the facts and figures
Mm-hmm.
and stories. So I point people there to,
Okay.
and if people want to get more involved and get emails to learn more about things that are happening, sign up
Okay.
through that. But yeah, in terms of, I mean, there's just so many. There's another resource called Equal Justice USA,
Okay.
ejusa.org. We work really closely with them, and they're a national group, but they're doing a lot around. They work on the death penalty, but they also do a lot around trauma and violence prevention. And so
Okay.
they've got amazing resources.
And what's it again?
Equal Justice USA,
Okay.
EJUSA.org.
EJUSA.org. Okay.
There is a book I'm reading right now called Until We Reckon
Ooh.
by a woman named Danielle Sered, Sered, and she's with a group called Common Justice in New York, and they are a restorative justice group. And this book is profound. I mean, the stuff I'm learning in this is just, it's very much sort of the ilk of the new Jim Crow when that book came out, and you know, it was sort of like this sort of kind of everybody went
Like, wait, what?
yeah,
That's what's
like
happening?
exactly. And this to me is of that ilk in terms of our system and what we say we want and what we're doing and how those things are matching up. So it's a powerful book. Again, called Until We Reckon.
Till we reckon.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, there's lots of great. I point people back to like Brian Stevenson and I'm blanking on the name of the film. I can't believe it. Just Mercy.
Okay.
Yeah, Just Mercy, which
Okay.
was his book that came out several years ago, and the film that came out. Really powerful stuff. Death Penalty Information Center. If people are interested in a deeper dive into the history and kind of the country and internationally and all that.
Wow, okay.
It's deathpenaltyinfo.org.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of links on our site. To
They
some
will
of these.
have links on their site.
We're gonna. I'm working on
to
this.
resources.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're going to be working on updating.
Take
that
notes,
as
staff.
I'm sitting. Yes, I'm like mental note.
Your website does look great, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
It, so,
well,
yeah.
that's a miracle since I'm the one. Well, I've got a lot of help.
You didn't
so
do it
I'm a
yourself.
Luddite, so no. But yeah, we're going to be doing this campaign, and so if you get on our emails, and we'll put some on the website about it, called Heal People, Heal People. That's the name of the
cool.
campaign.
Yeah.
It's going to start in August in Memphis. It'll be Memphis, Chattanooga, and Knoxville, and then we'll do an iteration of it in Nashville probably early next year.
Okay.
But it will be about a 2-day deal. First day will be people who have been victims of violence and really helping them figure out how to get help, like where resources are, what needs are being met, what needs aren't. And part of that's for us to learn and listen so we can come back and say, what do we need to be doing differently and get some policy around that.
Right, yeah.
But it's also just to be really hands-on to say, we know this is overwhelming. We need for you to understand how to do this and who can help you. So that's day one. Day two then is going to be a more public conversation around what are the needs of people who've experienced violence, what are the needs of communities to prevent violence, and how is the current narrative around the legal system, around this heavy focus on punishment, is that actually the right focus? And so that'll be a broader conversation, bringing restorative justice practitioners and all sorts of things. So I think it's going to be, and that part is open to everybody.
Cool.
So we'll be getting that out, more information about that. But again, we're just trying to elevate that conversation to at least be an alternative to the rhetoric we keep hearing about, well, we're just not being tough enough.
Yeah.
We humbly disagree with that.
Right. As do those mamas, right?
As do many mamas, yeah.
Well, okay, so what about for you? What is a book or resource that's just fun for you that you want to let people know about?
That is just
or podcast, whatever,
for
something that you do to just take yourself out of that world.
Well, I do love some Anne Lamott.
Okay, yeah.
And
I saw the funniest little post by her. Did you see it? It's her little shoes and then her grandbaby's shoes. And her shoes are like this and her grandbaby's shoes are like this. She said, I think we fed them too much.
She's the best.
So,
she's so good. But I do a lot of reading of Richard Rohr. I like Richard Rohr. And I'm actually
going to go visit the Center for
Are
Action
you?
Contemplation.
One of these days
September.
I'm going to do that too because I'm really, but I just
I'll leave breadcrumbs for
there
you.
There you go, so I can follow. Yes, you do. I kind of do follow you around. I just love a good novel, like just good, and I was trying to think.
You don't have to tell us what they are.
Well, I was trying to think of one just off the top of my head, and I read them so fast that sometimes I'm like,
right. So you are doing some of that to just
a lot.
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool. That's good.
So
all right.
I'm okay.
Okay, you've already told us your website. Where to find you? Want to repeat that one more time?
TennesseeDeathPenalty.org.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all spelled out.
Yep. And then, how about any parting words of encouragement you have for our listeners?
I would say be aware of what's happening around you, be informed, be proximate to people who are hurting, but check out when you need to.
Exactly.
And go for a walk.
Don't check out the whole time.
Check out the whole time, but when you need to, check out, go for a walk, laugh, listen to some music. It'll all still be there.
Yeah.
And then you do it again.
There you go. Come on back. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, it has been so awesome. We literally could speak for several more hours.
Of course. Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to any of the funny stories from the,
I'll have to come back.
The colorful family stories.
I'll have to come back.
I know, we have to come back.
Yes.
So Stacy is our maiden voyage here, Reverend Rector, I should say, here in our podcast room. So, yeah.
It's been lovely, Jule. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you all for listening. And we look forward to you continuing to find ways to pause for peace each and every day. Bye. Bye, Stacy.
That was great.